In 2024, Detroit man Curtis Dixon helped a man he believed was blind and even tried to give him money despite being broke. The encounter was secretly filmed as part of a social media video by Zachary Daraniowski, whose content involves pretending to be vulnerable to test strangers' kindness. Curtis was given $1,000 and the video went viral, portraying him as exceptionally compassionate, and he was given $100,000 more in a follow-up video. But within a few weeks of the videos gaining traction, Dixon was targeted because of the attention and cash he had received. He was lured outside under the pretense of helping a woman with her broken-down car, ambushed, kidnapped, beaten, and forced to withdraw money out of ATMs. His attackers then tied him up, poured gasoline on his SUV, and set it on fire. Luckily, Dixon survived after being pulled to safety, and multiple suspects were arrested, including his own nephew, turning the case into a chilling example of how kindness can turn someone into a target and transform a good deed into a near-fatal outcome. In 2006, comedian Bill Maher sparked backlash after attending a Halloween party dressed as Steve Irwin, wearing a khaki outfit with a fake stingray barbed through his chest just weeks after Irwin's real-life death. Irwin had died that September while filming a documentary when a stingray's barb pierced his heart, making the costume feel especially raw to fans and the public. Maher later defended it as dark humor, arguing that risk comes with working around wild animals, but critics called it disrespectful and too soon, turning the outfit into one of the most controversial celebrity costumes of the era. A 49-year-old man in Romania caused a devastating accident in 2016 while cutting firewood with a neighbor after the two had reportedly been drinking together. Authorities said he mishandled a running chainsaw during what witnesses described as joking around, striking the 53-year-old victim directly in the groin. The man was rushed into emergency surgery with catastrophic injuries, but doctors were unable to save his floppy Johnson. Investigators treated the incident as a reckless accident rather than an intentional attack, a grim reminder of how alcohol and dangerous objects can quickly turn a fun night into a life-altering tragedy.
So I got my katana.
It doesn't get easier to watch. Oh, that's a tough watch. That was when Twitch streamer Biscuit suffered a sudden severe injury live on stream after her katana slipped from its sheath. As the blade fell toward the floor, she instinctively tried to grab it, and it sliced into her hand, severing 2 tendons. She ended the stream almost immediately as she was taken to the emergency room.
I need to cut stream. I have to go to ER. I think I f***ed my fingers.
Hours later, the streamer posted an update from the hospital showing her arm heavily bandaged and immobilized. Tendon damage often requires surgery and long rehabilitation, with no guarantee of full strength or mobility ever returning. Juan Fernando Hermosa is considered the youngest serial killer in Ecuadorian history. Between 1991 and 1992, Hermosa murdered at least 22 people when he was just 15 years old, targeting taxi drivers and stealing their vehicles. But because he was a minor at the time of the killing, Ecuadorian law capped his sentence at 4 years regardless of the number of victims, and Hermosa was released after serving the maximum juvenile sentence. Almost immediately after his release, he was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered as an act of vigilante revenge connected to his heinous crimes. On June 5, 1986, 24-year-old New York City model Marla Hansen was asked by her landlord Stephen Roth to meet outside a Manhattan bar to collect an $850 security deposit he owed her. As they walked away, Hansen was ambushed by 2 men Roth had hired. One attacker restrained her head while the other slashed her face with razor blades, carving deep wounds across her cheeks as Roth stood by and watched. The attack required more than 150 stitches, leaving her with permanent disfigurement that effectively ended her modeling career. Hansen survived after extensive reconstructive surgery, and investigators later determined that Roth had ordered the attack after she rejected his romantic advances. He and the 2 attackers were convicted and sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison. Hansen said the trauma continued in court, where a defense attorney subjected her to a vicious and humiliating cross-examination, attacking her credibility, accusing her of manipulating men, and suggested she had falsely identified her attackers due to her being racist, an experience she described as worse than the physical attack itself. Here's a disturbing video of a man performing a religious milk offering ritual in the Ganges River in India, while nearby homeless and malnourished children rush in and try to catch it to drink. The ritual, meant to symbolize devotion and abundance, turns into a heartbreaking scene of desperation, as children who clearly have nothing to eat are forced to watch food being poured away, a moment that captures the extreme poverty surrounding one of the holiest rivers in the world. In 2012, archaeologists digging beneath a parking lot in Leicester, England, uncovered a human skeleton buried beneath several feet of asphalt. DNA testing later confirmed the remains belonged to King Richard III, the English king who was killed in battle in 1485 and had been missing for more than 500 years. One of the key clues was the severe curvature of the spine found in the skeleton, matching historical accounts that Richard had scoliosis and an uneven shoulder. The discovery solved one of England's oldest royal mysteries and revealed that a medieval king had been buried beneath what later became a modern car park. In 2023, an 18-year-old mother from Miami named Jasmine Paez was arrested after trying to hire a hitman to kill her 3-year-old son using a parody website called Rent a Hitman. Police say she filled out an online request form, uploaded a photo of her child, provided her address, and asked that the job be completed by the end of the week. In the message, she wrote that she wanted to get something done once and for all, and requested that her son be taken far, far away and possibly be killed. When investigators asked why she wanted her own son dead, Paez gave no real motive, only that she was overwhelmed and no longer wanted the responsibility of being a mother. The website's owner originally created Rent a Hitman as a joke, but after receiving hundreds of murder-for-hire requests over the years leading to multiple arrests, he now works closely with law enforcement and immediately reported Paez's request. Undercover officers posed as a hitman and arranged a meeting, where Paez allegedly confirmed she wanted the child dead. She was arrested and charged with solicitation to commit murder, and the boy was placed into protective custody unharmed. This was one of the last known photos taken of rapper XXXTentacion, moments before he was fatally shot during a robbery outside a Florida motorcycle dealership in June of 2018. Investigators determined it was not a targeted hit job, but a robbery gone wrong after suspects spotted his luxury vehicle and expensive Louis Vuitton bag. Released surveillance footage showed 2 gunmen approaching his car, demanding the bag and opening fire when he resisted. The 20-year-old artist, born Jose Onfroy, was shot multiple times at close range and died shortly after at a nearby hospital. In 2023, 3 men were convicted of his first-degree murder and armed robbery. Beatrice Flamini spent 500 days completely alone inside a cave nearly 230 feet underground, cut off from sunlight, clocks, and all human contact as part of an experiment on extreme isolation. She entered the cave in November of 2021 and did not emerge until April of 2023, with no communication with the outside world during that time. Scientists monitoring her remotely had found that her circadian rhythm had completely collapsed, with severe sleep disruption, memory lapses, and slowed cognition developing over time. Flamini later described moments of mental detachment and sensory distortion, and when she finally resurfaced, she genuinely believed she'd only been underground for about 160 days, illustrating how prolonged isolation can fundamentally fracture the brain's sense of time and reality. Researchers off the coast of Tenerife have captured extremely rare footage of a black sea devil, a deep-sea anglerfish that usually lives thousands of feet below the surface, swimming in unusually shallow water. The black sea devil is almost never seen alive in daylight, and scientists say this may be the first ever recorded video of the species swimming near the surface. Its sudden emergence has left researchers completely baffled, since deep-sea anglerfish usually only rise from the depths when they're sick, dying, or pushed upward by shifting ocean conditions. Here's a rare view of the insane intricacies of a computer chip. What you're looking at is a maze of microscopic pathways where billions of transistors switch on and off to process every command a device makes. The structures are engineered at a scale smaller than wavelengths of visible light, pushing the limits of modern manufacturing. Because of how abstract it looks at this level, it's often cited as an example of alien technology. That was a digital recreation of images, since a standard optical microscope can't resolve details that small. In order to actually see structures at that level in video format, you would need an extremely high-powered electron microscope. OF creator Bonnie Blue has been arrested in Bali after police raided a villa suspected of being used to film explicit content. 16 men were detained with her, but while most were released, Bonnie and 2 British men were held as officers seized phones and cameras based on a tip from inside the villa. She's now in immigration custody, questioned daily and without her passport, as officials prepare a court hearing and consider deportation in a long-term blacklist. Under Indonesia's morality laws, producing pornographic content can carry up to 15 years in prison. Mary Carol McDonnell, a 73-year-old former true crime TV producer, allegedly conned banks by posing as the heiress to an $80 million trust fund that never existed, securing nearly $30 million in fraudulent loans, including a $15 million payout she was never qualified to receive. But before the scheme unraveled, she completely disappeared, leaving behind a federal indictment, multiple aliases, and lenders scrambling to recover their losses. With possible ties to Los Angeles, Alabama, and Dubai, she was added to the FBI's FBI's Most Wanted list in 2025 as one of the country's most elusive white-collar fugitives. This man swore he discovered the secrets of the pyramids and then built something that shouldn't be possible. Coral Castle in Homestead, Florida is a massive stone structure built single-handedly by Latvian immigrant Edward Leeds Skalman between 1923 and 1951, using more than 1,100 tons or 2.5 million pounds of oolitic limestone. Ed stood barely 5 feet tall and weighed about 100 pounds, but managed to carve, lift, and position multi-ton blocks entirely on his own, often at night and without witnesses, sparking decades of speculation about how he moved such massive stones without any machinery. Visitors swear the site feels engineered with impossible precision. One of its stone gates, weighing over 8 tons, can spin freely with the push of a finger. Ed always claimed he had discovered the secrets of the pyramids, but never explained his methods, leaving behind perfectly balanced stone doors, astronomically aligned carvings, and walls heavier than cars. Coral Castle remains one of America's most mysterious handmade monuments, built out of obsessive heartbreak after Ed's fiancée canceled their wedding just a day before the ceremony. On August 9, 2021, 40-year-old surf instructor Matthew Taylor Coleman drove his 2 children, 2-year-old Khalil and 10-month-old Roxy, from Santa Barbara across the border into Mexico, telling his wife he was taking them on a short trip. But instead, he brought them to a remote ranch near Rosarito and murdered both children with a spearfishing gun. When arrested hours later, he confessed in disturbing detail, telling the FBI he believed his kids had inherited serpent DNA and that QAnon-style conspiracy theories had convinced him he needed to kill them to save the world. Agents said he showed no signs of remorse, only fear that he had made a mistake. Coleman was charged with 2 counts of murder and remains in federal custody awaiting trial. In 2018, Richard Bebo Russell, a 28-year-old Horizon Air ground agent, stunned the aviation world when he quietly climbed into a Bombardier Q400 at Seattle-Tacoma Airport, started the engines from knowledge he'd picked up from YouTube and flight simulators, and took off without a license or clearance. For nearly an hour, he flew over Puget Sound chatting calmly with air traffic control, admitting he was a broken guy while performing a full barrel roll in a 76-seat passenger plane. F-15 fighter jets scrambled to intercept him, but he refused to land, steering the aircraft away from cities before deliberately crashing it into the woods of Ketron Island. The explosion killed only him, scorched acres of forest, and exposed a massive security gap at the airport. In 2014, 43-year-old Chad Olson was reportedly texting his babysitter during movie previews when the man behind him, 71-year-old retired police captain Curtis Reeves, told him to put the phone away. The argument escalated. Olson tossed a handful of popcorn in frustration, and Reeves instantly responded by pulling a handgun and shooting him in the chest. Olson died later that day, while his wife was also injured while trying to block the shot with her hand. Despite witnesses saying Olson never got physical beyond the popcorn, a jury ultimately acquitted Reeves in 2022, accepting his claim that he fired in self-defense under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. A 29-year-old Florida woman managed to impersonate a registered nurse for months, slipping into a hospital job while using someone else's license number. During that time, she treated more than 4,000 patients, taking vitals, administering medications, and performing procedures she wasn't trained for. Staff only uncovered the truth when she was offered a promotion and her credentials didn't add up. Investigators later learned she'd been working on the floor for far longer than anyone realized, blending in so well that no one questioned her until she tried to move up. She now faces multiple felony charges, while thousands of patients are being notified that the person who cared for them wasn't a nurse at all. At Disney Springs, a bizarre robbery unfolded straight out of a heist movie in September of 2025. A man in full scuba gear swam up to the Paddlefish restaurant after midnight, snuck inside, and forced 2 employees to the ground as they were counting cash. He stole over $10,000, then slipped back into the water and vanished beneath the surface, escaping the same way he arrived. When police got there, all they found were wet footprints, discarded dive gear, and 2 shaken employees tied up inside. To this day, the aquatic thief hasn't been identified. Before he became famous, Vanilla Ice claims he survived a brutal stabbing and a near-fatal nightclub attack. When he was 16, he got caught in the middle of a gang fight in South Dallas and was stabbed 5 times, one wound narrowly missing his heart. Doctors reportedly said the blade came so close that another half-inch would have killed him. Months later, he was nearly beaten to death outside a club after a show, leaving him with permanent nerve damage in his arm. This doll belonging to a 5-year-old girl has been watching over her gravesite since her death in 1912. In April of 2001, 20-year-old Branson Perry completely vanished from his father's home in Skidmore, Missouri. He told a friend he was stepping outside to put a pair of jumper cables into the shed, but was never seen again. His van, wallet, and all personal belongings were left behind. Despite searches, interviews, and 2 decades of investigation, no remains have ever been found and no one has ever been charged. To this day, Branson Perry's disappearance remains one of Missouri's most haunting unsolved cases. In one of the most evil cases of betrayal ever recorded, a man from New Zealand secretly infected his wife with HIV using a sewing needle dipped in his own blood. After cheating on her and being diagnosed himself, he feared she would leave him. So while she slept, he pricked her leg, leaving only a tiny sting and a red mark. Months later, during a routine checkup, she tested positive for the virus and confronted him. He chillingly confessed, saying he only did it so she would be the same as me and would never leave. Prosecutors later called it an act of pure cruelty, and the man was sentenced to prison for willfully injecting another with a disease, a charge so rare that even the judge called it almost without precedent. In honor of Veterans Day, these are some of the most badass soldiers in American history. After 9/11, NFL safety Pat Tillman turned down a multi-million-dollar contract with the Cardinals to instead join the U.S. Army. He served several combat tours in the Army Rangers before he was tragically killed by friendly fire in the mountains of Afghanistan. Prior to his death, Tillman called the invasion and occupation of Iraq effing illegal. During World War II, Native American Joe Medicine Crow completed all 4 feats required to become a war chief: touching an enemy without killing him, taking an enemy's weapon from him, leading a war party, and stealing an enemy horse. He overachieved on the last one by stealing 50 horses from the Nazi SS, singing a traditional Crow honor song as he rode off. In Iraq, Sergeant Major Bradley Kazal was shot 7 times in the legs and ripped apart by 43 grenade fragments after throwing himself over a wounded Marine. Even with both legs shattered and bleeding out nearly 60% of his blood onto the floor, Kazal kept firing his M9 pistol, killing at least 1 insurgent while dragging his men to safety. The infamous photo of him being carried out while still gripping his pistol became one of the war's most iconic images and later inspired the No Man Left Behind statue. Kazal survived after 21 surgeries and the loss of 4 inches of bone from his leg. After a brutal battle in Vietnam, Master Sergeant Roy Benavides had 37 puncture wounds, exposed intestines, and a broken jaw. He was pronounced dead until he spit in the face of a doctor who was zipping him up in a body bag. Benavides went on to fully recover and was later awarded the Medal of Honor. In 1944, American Private Edward Orange was found clutching a sword while surrounded by 13 dead Japanese soldiers. Barely hanging on to life, his last words were, "I guess they didn't know I was a Marine." In Afghanistan, Marine Kyle Carpenter saw a grenade land between him and another Marine. With no time to run, he threw himself on top of it, taking the full blast to his face and torso. The explosion blew out his eye, collapsed his lungs, shattered his jaw, and stopped his heart as medics initially thought he was certainly dead. After more than 40 surgeries, Carpenter somehow survived, becoming the youngest living recipient of the Medal of Honor. During World War II, American Lieutenant John Fox died after deliberately calling an artillery strike on himself. Realizing that German troops were overriding his position, the strike delayed the enemy long enough for other American units to organize a counterattack that ultimately won them the battle. Hugh Redman was an American paratrooper who later spied on communists in China for the CIA. He was captured in 1951 and endured 19 years of brutal torture since he refused to reveal who he worked for. Most likely murdered by his captors, his ashes were sent home in 1970, and he was given a headstone that read, "His country above all else." In Iraq in 2009, Sergeant Dakota Meyer disobeyed a direct order to pull back from his position. Instead, he entered an area that was under heavy fire so that he could rescue 4 wounded soldiers. He ended up going back 5 times and saved the lives of 36 men, later saying, "That's what you do for a brother." Meyer would become the first living Marine in nearly 4 decades to receive the Medal of Honor. During World War II, American Private Thomas Baker was gravely wounded by the Japanese but refused to give up the fight. He ordered his squad to leave him propped up against a tree with nothing but a pistol and 8 bullets. He was later found dead with the empty pistol and the bodies of 8 Japanese soldiers scattered around him. In the Vietnam War, American sniper Carlos Hathcock volunteered to crawl for 3 days across 200 meters of open field containing an enemy headquarters, took a single shot that killed an NVA general, then crawled back out without being seen. Legendary sniper Chris Kyle became so feared in Iraq that insurgents called him the Devil of Ramadi and put a $20,000 bounty on his head. With 160 confirmed kills, his shots were so lethal that enemy fighters reportedly warned each other not to step into sunlight. His most famous kill came from over 1.5 miles away, dropping an insurgent carrying an RPG before he could fire it. Kyle survived ambushes, IEDs, and close-quarter fights that should have killed him, only to be murdered back home by a Marine he was trying to help.